My fellow gamers, allow me to propose to you a scenario. Let's say you know somebody who owns a PS4 that has never experienced Shadow of the Colossus. That person now has the chance to experience the adventure of a lifetime in the highest possible fidelity. However, given the standards of modern gamers, how do you convince somebody to spend roughly $50 on a nearly 13-year-old game? If you were to boil down what Shadow of the Colossus is to its most basic terms, it's essentially 16 boss fights and the traveling between them. That is what it is, but in no way does that description capture the game's majesty. It certainly wouldn't convince many consumers to run out to the store. Shadow of the Colossus is more than just a game. It's a spiritual meditation. The game's beauty lies not just with the scaling of colossal beasts, but with the moments of quiet contemplation. As you ride your horse throughout the Forbidden Land, unanswerable questions cloud your mind. Questions like, where did these colossi come from? What happened to this land and what makes it forbidden? Who is Dormin? Or is it more appropriate to ask, who are Dormin? None of these questions have definitive answers, but there are clues to help us along the right path. This is where the game's true genius lies, piecing together what exactly is going on in this world, and those moments of quiet contemplation give you plenty of time to figure out the answers for yourself, to let your imagination run wild with possibility. While no canonical explanation of the game's world and narrative has been released, I believe that through rational deduction and careful attention to clues and evidence, a proper explanation can be derived. Needless to say, there are spoilers ahead. In this video, we will be discussing the following. Who is the protagonist and his female companion? Who is Lord Emon? What happened to the Forbidden Land? Who is/are Dormin and the Shadow Creatures? And what is the nature of the Colossi? Other elements of the game will be explained in conjunction with these categories. Now, let's get started. The character we play is named Wander, but that might not be obvious to those who play English versions of the game. For example, on the original UK website for the game, there's a link one can click that says, "What is the Wanderer's name?" The answer is as follows: it matters not. His efforts were not for the cause of creating a legend for himself. We only know that his name is Wander because of the way the game was originally titled in Japanese, Wanda and the Colossus. The reason why it is titled Wanda instead of Wander is because the Japanese do not have any words in their language that end in ER, and since written Japanese is based on pronunciation, they did their best to emulate the name Wander in Japanese Romaji. But enough with the grammar lesson. Wander's backstory isn't exactly clear, but one can make an educated guess based on various elements. Let's start with the obvious. Wander travels to this forbidden land with his deceased companion, a woman named Mono. Mono is recently deceased because she was sacrificed, on account of a supposedly cursed fate. It can be logically deduced that Wander was in love with Mono and feels guilt over the fact that his tribe sacrificed her over an incorporeal prophecy of a cursed fate. There are a couple of reasons to assume that Wander had romantic feelings towards Mono. One piece of evidence comes from the synopsis on the game's PS2 box art. The synopsis describes the story as one of companionship and undying love. There is another reason to assume that Wander had romantic feelings towards Mono, but we'll discuss that a little later. After Wander arrives in the Forbidden Land and places Mono's body on the altar, we hear a voice speaking of the Forbidden Land's origin. The voice we hear is that of a character named Lord Emon. Lord Emon is a shaman and presumably the leader of Wander's tribe. Like Wander, he wears clothing with similar sigils. His narration is brief and vague, but contains clues that point us in the right direction. What we can discern for certain from Lord Emon's words is the following. 1. It's forbidden to enter these lands. 2. An entity that can control beings of light lives there, and 3, supposedly one can discover a way to bring back the souls of the dead in that land. As we play the game beyond this point, the player starts to deduce that there was once a civilization built around this entity and this power to resurrect the dead. This civilization clearly existed centuries ago, as several structures that remain are barely standing. So what happened to everybody? It is theorized that Lord Emon represents a religious tribe that was opposed to the religion once practiced in the Forbidden Land, a tribe that existed long before his time. In order to prevent the spread of this religion, the tribe sought converts who might be willing to stage a mutiny against this religion and its deity. The mutiny was clearly successful, as the land is now deserted and the architecture has suffered from centuries of decay. A natural question that arises is why a mutiny would be staged. Well, I think it's safe to say that if you worship a god who has horns and whose domain is the land of the dead, certain moral and ethical questions might arise. Some may say that Dormin's status as an evil being is in question. Maybe he's a benevolent god and he was wrongly suppressed by Lord Emon's elders from centuries ago. Based on the evidence available to us, I theorize that Dormin is definitely an evil being, and here's why. Shadow of the Colossus is a game made by a team of developers named Team Ico. That development team made 2 other games, Ico and The Last Guardian. All 3 games have been proven to share the same universe. Even if this wasn't confirmed, it could be logically deduced. All 3 games feature antagonists who have power over the forces of light and darkness. And I don't mean that in a metaphorical way. I mean actual light and actual darkness. Dormin is no exception. In all 3 games, it is understood that all living beings have a light side and a dark side. In other words, living beings are the objectified form of the yin-yang symbol, a mortal balance of chaos and order. Through a specific method of sacrifice, a living being may have their light half extracted and their dark half may come under the control of the primary antagonist. In Ico, the horned boys have their light half extracted by being placed into sarcophagi. In The Last Guardian, people have their light half extracted by being sacrificed to the Master of the Valley. In that particular case, the light half is melted down into glowing barrels and fed to the Trico creatures. The shadow half animates the armored knights we see throughout the game. In Shadow of the Colossus, a living being has their light half extracted at the tip of the ancient sword. This is why the Colossi and Demon Wander are overcome by shadow upon their death. This is why Dormin recognizes the ancient sword at the beginning of the game. The reason why these sacrifices are performed in all 3 games is because the extracted light half can be used to create powerful implements. In The Last Guardian, the shield that is used throughout the game has the ability to shine light. In Ico, security systems and weapons could be created, both of which have the ability to shine light. In Shadow of the Colossus, the ancient sword also has the ability to shine light. This is why the Forbidden Land existed, and why a religion was built around Dormin. However, there are obvious ethical problems involved with killing people in order to sustain a civilization. As well, the fact that those sacrifices come under the permanent control of Dormin as beings made of light is obviously oppressive. Lord Emon's elders rebelled, and they rebelled as such. A spell was performed to separate Dormin's body into 16 fragments as a way of containing their power. The separation of Dormin's body is a reference to the biblical king Nimrod, which is Dormin spelled backwards. Upon Nimrod's death, his body was also cut into multiple pieces and dispersed. These fragments were placed within the bodies of the 16 colossi. Now we come to the final question. How did these colossi come to be? If we look at the colossi, it seems that several parts of their body, specifically their armor, look like they belonged to buildings once upon a time. It is my belief that the spell performed by Lord Emon's elders involved taking the remaining light essence in the Forbidden Land, combining it with the earth and the architecture, and fusing it with a fragment of Dormin's soul. My evidence for this is as follows. On several colossi, the light essence shines through cracks in their skin. When a colossus dies, it is almost as if their bodies turn into dirt and fuse with the earth. It is by creating 16 imposing dangerous beasts and only being able to kill them with implements made of light that the tribe hoped to permanently seal away Dormin's power forever. They never expected a warrior with enough conviction would come along and do the impossible, but the elders underestimated how far a human being would go for the one he loves. And this is where I return to the question of Wander's true relationship with Mono. At the end of the game, Wander is reborn as an infant. The light in the sword combined with his dark half in a pool of water, and he is made mortal again. However, he is reborn with horns. When Wander grows up, it is through procreation that a lineage of horned children was created, a lineage that included a young boy named Ico. And this is how Mono fulfills her cursed fate, by giving birth to a child who carries the essence of the Lord of the Dead.